little bit of it. Arel is a best-selling author, professional speaker, and owner of Oak LLC. He has traveled to 48 states and 5 countries, teaching strategies for success. He has spoken at the White House, for billion-dollar companies, and to inner-city kids. Arel has been named to Inc. magazine's 30 Under 30 list and CNY's 40 Under 40 list. He has been featured in USA Today, Inc. magazine, the New York Times, Huffington Post, Essence, and Black Enterprise magazine. He now teaches people how to find their voice and spread their message with public speaking and creating online courses. Today, he will be teaching some ideas that he has been learning from people who are succeeding amid COVID-19 so that you can apply those strategies in your life and in your business. We do have a couple of ground rules we just wanted to run through. Everyone will be muted during the webinar except for Arel. During the presentation, continue to send things into the chat. We can both see those. We're going to go ahead and take questions at 2 different times. We'll probably take like a halfway break. And so send them throughout. We're going to answer them at 2 different times. And then at the end, we'll have a full Q&A for anything that's left over. We are recording this, so if you want to check it out, it'll be on the Center State CEO YouTube page afterward. And so it'll be a great resource to kind of tap into later. And I think that is all of the rules I'm going to run through. So I'm going to pass it off to Arel.
Awesome. You know, I think right now there is an incredible amount of questions and an incredible amount of, if you are in a leadership role, how are you communicating to your team? Because ultimately, one of the things that I know is that if you're on this session with us, that Center State has so graciously put together, and they're doing a lot of great content, by the way. I highly encourage you to keep connected because they have their pulse on what's happening here in Central New York. And I think that ultimately, one of the biggest challenges, if you're the type of person that's on this session, you're most likely in a leadership role. You most likely have family members who look at you as kind of the centerpiece to their sanity and their family. You probably have coworkers, you have employees, you have team members that depend upon you to kind of lead them through rough waters. Now, something like COVID-19 is absolutely brand new. We haven't had something like this. Yes, we had the Spanish flu back in the day, and yes, we had all those other swine flus and H1N1s and all that stuff, but nothing has globally impacted us the way this has. So if you're someone who is running a business and as an entrepreneur, you're kind of questioning, how do I navigate through this time as an entrepreneur? This is going to be for you. If you work for an organization and you are in a leadership role and you need to figure out how to calm and deal with yourself, but also how to lead your people through this and make sure your organization still survives, this is going to be for you. Because though COVID-19 is brand new, I'd like for you to consider that a down economy is not brand new. I would like for you to consider that businesses closing down, unemployment rates, they're not brand new. So if we put what's happening into a framework of, there is some background to this, there is some ideologies that we can pull from, we can actually start learning from those experiences and apply them so that we can get the most out of this time period. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the stimulus package. I think there's a second stimulus package that they're discussing, and there's PPP loans, and there's, are they going to forgive rent? Are they going to forgive mortgages? And depending upon which side of the fence you're on, it's a very, very scary time. What I can tell you is that if you went through highs and lows of being super optimistic, to thinking it's not a big deal, to thinking that the world is collapsing and that things as we know it will never come. If you've done more Zoom meetings with professional on the top, but relaxed on the bottom, I mean, I'm going to question, and I'm just curious how many people are doing pajamas right now. You can have bottoms on the pajamas and tops looking very professional. The funny thing is, if you have to get up together, they think you might get found out. But, you know, so as much fun as that can be, there's obviously a lot of stress to it. So the biggest thing that I want you to start focusing on is that there is a distinction between how we start controlling what we can control and how we let things actually affect us, whether it's through our emotional state or whether it's through our financial state. When we control what we can control, we feel like we have power. When we feel helpless, when we feel out of control, that's when we get anxiety, we get nervousness, we get doubt, we get fear. But there is a misunderstanding of two very important concepts. So what I want to do is give you a better definition, because what I believe is that if you understand something, you can now do something about it, right? So as an example, if you've been walking around and you have a pain in your elbow, and that pain in your elbow has been there and it's persistent, and you go to the doctors and the doctors go, we don't know what it is, we don't know what it is. And you go, look, there's a problem, I've got pain. What happened is, typically what our minds do is we go to the worst case scenario. It's cancer of the bone. It's a genetic deficiency. I'm gonna get my arm cut off. Like that's where we typically go if we don't understand what's happening. But as soon as we meet that doctor who can actually identify, here's what the issue is, there's something that happens from that, which is hope. Because once you know what the issue is, you can now look at what are my options to do something about it. So understanding is the first step to controlling the controllables. Now, there's an idea of disappointment and regret. These words, unfortunately, get kind of interchanged, but if we can actually get clarity on the difference between disappointment and regret, we can communicate to ourselves and communicate to our teams with more control. Now, regret is really important. Regret actually, psychologically, a lot of studies have come out of Harvard, and they've actually shown regret is really, really powerful. Here's why. Regret is something like you are in a business meeting and you wish you could raise your hand, or you wish you would have raised your hand and you didn't. And you go, you know what? I regret not raising my hand and saying something because I thought I had something of value to say, but I was too afraid to. Next time I'm in this situation, I'm going to do something about it. So regret helps inform our decisions. Regret could also be you have a family member and they come to you with a problem and they share that problem with you, and you start giving them feedback and giving them advice and giving them great coaching, and they don't take it, and then they actually get more frustrated with you. Then you regret saying, you know what, I shouldn't have given that feedback. I should have just been there to listen, because what they really needed was just someone to listen to them. Next time I'm in that situation, I'm going to make sure I don't give feedback. I just listen. So that regret is actually a really, really good thing. The regret helps you observe your behaviors and readjust them in the future when something similar presents itself. So you look at anything of your life and how you've gotten better at your career. You know, I'd encourage you to actually take a moment and look inside of yourself. Think about things that you've done in your career that you've regretted, that you've changed, and you've said, I'm not going to let that happen again. So that's a really actually a good thing. Now, this is the difference between regret and disappointment. So disappointment is the feeling as if we have missed out on something, okay? So disappointment is I've missed out on something. I could have went to that concert and I didn't go, and all my friends had fun, and they went backstage and they got to meet my favorite artist of all time, and they got pictures with them, and that would have just made my day. I'm so disappointed I didn't go, because there's a perceived missing out on something, okay? So regret is something happens, you wish it would have been different, you have an experience that you can now learn from and make better, okay? Disappointment is I missed out on an opportunity. I wish this opportunity would have been better. I wish I would have done something different. I'm never going to have that opportunity again. I now am disappointed. So the first thing to understand is that there's a difference between how we are currently looking at this whole pandemic. Are we looking at it through the eyes of regret, or are we looking at it through the eyes of disappointment? Follow me for a second. Disappointment would be, you know what, this is what I would be doing in my business right now if everything didn't get shut down. We were on track to have the best year of our business. Everything was locking and loading and moving in the right direction. And all of a sudden this thing happens. And if this didn't happen, we would have been doing this. And I would have saved this much money. And we would have closed these kind of deals. And I would have been speaking here. And all these good things would have happened, right? That's disappointment. So what happens is we start spending an incredible amount of our time focusing on what could have been. But to be honest with you, you don't know if that actually could happen, right? We don't actually know. Humans, if you actually think about it, it's kind of interesting. There's a psychological concept called counterfactual thinking, okay? Counterfactual thinking. So what that basically means is our human brain, mind, is the only mind that can actually think about an alternate example, an alternate like universe, if you will, of what could have happened, an alternate example of results. So if COVID-19 didn't happen, we would be doing X, we would be doing Y. Well, that's counterfactual because it did actually happen. And what's interesting is, to be honest with you, the biggest challenge between regret and disappointment is a concept that's called rumination. When we start ruminating on an idea, when we start basically obsessively thinking about one concept over and over, it moves from being helpful to actually being destructive. So when we look at disappointment, you start saying things like, man, if COVID-19 wouldn't have happened, I would have got this contract, I would have got that contract. Oh, we would have went on this vacation. We would have had this great experience. Here's the thing. You have no idea if that's actually true. You know why? Because what if you would have went, and this is a harsh example, but bear with me. What if that big vacation that you would have went on, you would have went on that vacation and then the plane you were on crashed and then you would have died. All of a sudden, that's a horrible vacation, right? And again, God forbid, I would never want that or wish that. But the thing is, that's also in the realm of possibility too. You could have went on that vacation and while you're there, you could have had everything stolen and you could have gotten an incredible disease or something. Or you could have went to a place that had a natural disaster that hurt many people and you could have been caught in it. So when we do counterfactual thinking, we start thinking about all of these great things that could have happened. But in reality, it's just as equally possible that something horrible could have happened while you were there. So rumination is when we start thinking about something over and over and over and over again. And this is actually where regret becomes bad. Now, again, regret becomes, well, if I would have said this, or if I would have done this, I could have got better. If I do this again, I'll be in a better situation. Here's what rumination is. And this will be good. Think about the last argument you got into with someone you love, all right? Whether it's a spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, family member. Think about someone you love. What do we typically do when that fight's over? You're in your car and you're driving and you're going, you know what? When they said this, I should have said that. And if they said this, I should have said, well, what about this? And then, what about that? But you don't even do, and they talk about how I don't do the dishes. Well, you know what? You don't do the dish. And I should have said, well, I've been doing the dishes for 13 years, right? So we do this rumination thing. So we start replaying it in our head and we start playing out circumstances of what you should have said and what you could have done. And if you look at your bank account and you notice that the dollars are going down quicker than they're going up, and you're saying, well, I should have did that deal and I should have, not bought this stupid thing that I thought I wanted, that I could have waited. That rumination is what starts bringing us down. So what I want you to first grasp is that you have to understand and communicate to your team members. Are we focused on disappointment right now, or are we focused on regret? If we're focused on regret, man, I wish this wouldn't have happened, well, then there's something you can do in the future based on that regret. If you're focused on disappointment, you're conceptually trying to come up with an alternate universe, alternate ending, that there's no actual way that you can predict. So the first thing I would ask you to do is observe what you've been most stressed about. Observe what you've been most nervous about, just on an emotional, personal power perspective. And ask yourself, is it more regret or is it more disappointment? Okay. So I want you to catch the distinction. If you're focused on regret, there's something you can do about it in the future. That gives you opportunity. That gives you the chance to grow. That's a good thing. So you can start saying, well, in the future, I would do this. In the future, I wouldn't make this purchase, or in the future, I would have contacted this. Beautiful. If it's disappointment, what you're focusing on is what could have been, what should have been. And that's an alternate universe that there's 1,000 other barriers that could have went horrifically wrong as much and equally as it could have gone amazingly good. Disappointment is what leads to a lot of stress. Disappointment is what leads to a lot of, well, you know what? I'm just doing things wrong. Okay. Now, the other two phrases above disappointment and regret that get often confused during this time is risk versus uncertainty. Now, before I jump into risk versus uncertainty, just because I'm aware of how the webinar format works, some of us right now might be checking Instagram. Some of us right now might be checking up soap opera stories from The Last Dance. Did Michael Jordan really do this? So just so I know we're still paying attention, because if this was a live presentation, I could actually see your faces. But since this is video, I can't. Some of you probably just said, oh, snap. I didn't know that he could see me. And I was scrolling through something else. But if y'all are with me and this is making sense so far, do me a favor, in the chat, just say, yeah, buddy. Okay, so just in the chat, give me a yeah, buddy, if this is making sense so far. If it is making no sense to you, say, nah, buddy, and I will make sure we can get to it. Okay, I'm getting some yeah, buddies here. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Melissa. Wonderful. Thank you, Megan. All right, so this is making sense. Perfect. Tiffany, Jane, Jennifer. Thank you. I love also seeing how y'all spell yeah, buddy. Some of y'all put a whole lot of E-A's and H's in there. Okay, wonderful. I'm still with you. All right, we're gonna keep going because we're gonna go. I can't wait to get to these next parts. Okay, so I'm glad y'all are still with me. Now, disappointment and regret. So the first distinction is to start thinking, am I doing counterfactual thinking? When you're communicating to your team, I highly encourage you, again, you can either show them this video on replay and then have a conversation about it, or you can lead a discussion where the stressor is at their highest, the conversations are at their most negative. Ask yourself, are we focused on disappointment or are we focused on regret? Because we can control regret, we can't control disappointment. So the first thing I want you to do is separate the distinction between the two, because you can start doing something and taking action. Now, the next thing that gets really confused is risk versus uncertainty, okay? Now, risk is a natural part of doing business. Every single one of you have risk. Risk management is a legitimate industry and field. If anyone's in insurance, you can't survive without risk. But what is risk and what is uncertainty? The difference between the two and understanding the distinctions between the two will help you also navigate better through this time, okay? Risk is basically evidence from the past that gives you a sense of what the outcomes could be, okay? Risk has evidence from the past that gives you suggestions about what the outcome could be. So for example, and again, I am not a risk management professional, I'm not an insurance professional, but what I've heard is that if you're a healthy person who doesn't smoke and doesn't drink, there's a certain age that life insurance says you'll probably die around this age based on numbers. So they know if you're gonna get a policy and you're 20 years old, you probably got a good 52-year spread before you die. So they're able to give you a much lower premium because they say based on the risk of your health, based on the risk of your background, we think you'll probably live this long. We'll give you a low premium because you're a low risk. Now, if you're somebody who's 85 years old and you have a pre-existing condition, the risk of you passing away is super high, right? It's just, again, I hope that if you have someone who's 85, that they live a very long life. But risk-wise and statistically, if you're 85 with a pre-existing condition, the odds of you living another 30 to 40 years are so infinitesimally small that your premium would have to go up, okay? So does that analogy make sense? Do me a favor in the chat. If that makes sense, just say yes. So risk is there's these stats, there's these details that we can look at, and based on them, we can make decisions about the future. Okay, cool. This makes sense because this is really important. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Garrett. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, thank you, Mia. Thank you, David. Right? So that's risk. What happens with uncertainty is there's literally nothing we can compare certain things to, right? So if you look at the two jars here, risk is filled with marbles because we can say, based on these past experiences, we know we can do this and we know we can do that. Uncertainty, literally, I have no framework for how to deal with such a thing. That's uncertainty. It's totally uncertain. I have no idea. I've never been in a situation like this before. Risk has this back experience, these details. Uncertainty is brand new. I've never done this before. I've never experienced this before. So here's what happens, which is interesting about how the mind works. Our minds need to feel control. We have to. We have to feel like we know what's going on. So in uncertain times, what we try to do is figure out how to move from uncertainty, I have no idea how to handle this, to risk. I can figure it out. So this is how most people are currently handling it. With so much uncertainty, we're watching the news 4 hours a day. We're checking up on whatever news station we get our news from consistently. We're watching every single daily update from Governor Cuomo. We're reading what our friends are saying because we're consuming all of this data because we're hoping that we can move by consuming more data from uncertainty to risk. There's so much I don't know. There's so much no one knows. Are our kids going to be in physical schools in the fall? We don't know. It's uncertain. Do I got to keep homeschooling my kid? But you understand what I'm saying? There's uncertainty. We don't know if the schools will be open. We don't know. So what happens is we try to do all this research. What are other schools doing? What are other people doing? What other programs exist? So there's all this incredible searching because we're trying to take this thing that's uncertain and move it into risk. Now, here's the thing. Unless you work for the school board and unless you're coming up with the plan that's going to be uniformly used throughout the school systems of Oswego County or Syracuse County, uncertainty is something we've never dealt with before. So unless you are part of the active solution, i.e. will kids go back to school in the fall, and you are part of making that decision, reading 4 hours a day of articles on what people are thinking will happen, what people are doing in Italy, what people are doing in France, the openings in Florida if you don't live in Florida, all that does is lead to rumination. Rumination leads to disappointment. Disappointment leads to anxiety, fear, depression, and all of those things. Now, again, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor, I'm not saying this is the only way that it happens. I want to be very clear. I'm saying this is one potential path that is very probable for many people during this time. So what happens is by searching the news 5 times a day, by watching social media content 6 hours a day in between work, we're trying to take something that's uncertain and make it risky. And we just can't do that. Like, we can't do that, right? So what I want you to focus on is instead, what can you actually control? At the end of the day, you can watch 30 minutes of the news and get all of the same information you would have gotten if you checked it 6 hours throughout the day. Like, that's the big thing. So I want you to really understand that as you're communicating to yourself, like your internal dialogue, and as you're communicating to your team, I want you to make sure that you're clearly making a distinction between regret and disappointment, and then you're also making a distinction between risk and uncertainty. I can make decisions based on risk. If I invest $5,000, I could lose that $5,000. I can make money with that $5,000 based on what I've noticed with this particular investment. This is the patterns. I think this is a good investment. It's worth the risk. Uncertainty is, when will your business open up? When will Cuomo say it's okay? we don't fully know. I know there's a whole phase process and there's all that stuff that might give us insights, but ultimately there's a lot of things we don't know. So we have to start moving into actions and activities we have control over instead of trying to control uncertainty, which by definition, there's no way to even control it, okay? So what I want to do, I have some more content here, but I want to pause. I want to open it up for questions. If anyone has questions about how you communicate this to your team, if you have any questions about, does this make sense even? If you go, I kind of sort of get it, but you went super deep on me, bro. I wasn't expecting this cerebralness. I could try to give you some more analogies, examples, because the next part of what we do is built upon us having a good grasp of this. Regret versus disappointment. Understand the difference between the two. Regret is based on something I can do better in the future. Disappointment is based on a counterfactual belief that an alternate ending should have happened, right? So you got to understand which one are you focused on. Rumination is this constant focus of playing something over and over in our heads, and that leads to a lot of down feelings. And there's risk and uncertainty. Uncertainty, can't do anything with that. Literally can't. It doesn't matter how many news articles you read. It doesn't matter how much you look up. You can't move uncertainty to risk. It just can't. So doing rumination on uncertainty doesn't help you get any more clarity on risk, okay? Now, I'm gonna keep it moving. If you have questions, pop them in at any time. We will make sure we ask questions at the end too. There's a really cool example of how your physiology can actually impact how you process data, right? From risk, from uncertainty. Now, what's interesting is because many of us are actually spending probably more time on our computers than ever, what you'll find is that there's a natural physiology that you will take on while you're consuming computer data, which is typically leaned over, squinted eyes, okay? Some of you might have just put your shoulders back and be like, nah, that's not me. I'm gonna put my shoulders back. I'm gonna open my eyes up, right? But for the most part, you're either A, like looking at your phone, and most people are squinted over with their eyes closed, okay? Now, this is super fascinating, okay? Oh, there was a quick question. Let me answer that question. Focus on what you can control. How did you wrap up that thought? Yes. So when we're focusing on what we can control, we move towards regret versus disappointment. I can't control disappointment because it's an alternate universe that doesn't really exist. Regret means in the future I can do something, I can control that. Uncertainty, I have no control over things that are uncertain. I can control things over risk. So what we want to do when we're communicating to our teams and communicating to ourselves is make sure our dialogue and our conversation isn't leading towards counterfactual thinking or alternate universe thinking, and it's not leading towards uncertainty. We're having our conversations based on how do we do something based on what we know. That's controlling what you can control, okay? Okay, hopefully that was helpful. Now, when we look at our screens like this with squinted eyes, and we look at our computers and we know with squinted eyes, there's actually an interesting physiological response that happens to the brain. And I can show you better than I can tell you. So I need everyone to actually do this, okay? So everyone do me a favor, whether you're looking at your phone right now, whether you're sipping a cup of coffee or eating a banana, or maybe you're, I don't know, playing Sudoku because you like numbers. I need you to stop, put that down, and look at me for a second because you got to see me to make this work. What I want you to do is raise your eyebrows for a second, okay? I want you to just raise your eyebrows and kind of widen your eyes, similar to the gentleman that we have on the screen here, okay? So in this state, I want you to keep your physiology exactly the same. Keep your eyebrows up, your eyes widen, but I want you to get angry. Like imagine you're getting like you're really mad at something, but you can't squint your eyes and you can't necessarily lower your eyebrows, okay? I want you to observe that if I ask you to put your face in this state and then get angry, your natural inclination is to actually squint your eyes and lower your brow, okay? If that's true, just write true. Unless you're Najee, I can't ever read Najee's face. He's the most stoic human. If anyone knows Najee, that dude could be 1,000% excited or 100% mad, and I don't know. I just like to think that he's happy when I see him. But for the most part, if your eyes are open and your eyebrows are up, you want to squint to get angry, right? But when they're open, you're actually more open to ideas. Okay, so it's true. People are noticing it. When you want to get angry, your natural inclination is to squint. So here's why this is fascinating. Let's play the opposite role. Okay, so for a moment, I want you to squint your eyes. Okay, so squint and then bring your eyebrows down. And now I want you in this state to feel like excited about something or feel open to the possibility of something cool happening. But keep the brow down and the eyes squinted. Okay, excited. Like naturally, if you want to get excited or open to an idea, there's literally an openness that happens to your face. Your eyebrows go up and your eyes widen. So in the same way, when our eyes are lowered, it's difficult to open them. When our eyes are opened and our eyebrows are up, it's difficult to get angry without lowering them. Here's why this is wildly fascinating, okay? So, what happens to us when we're consuming all of this data and information to move from uncertainty to risk, 9 times out of 10, we're squinting our eyes and bringing our eyebrows down. By definition, that is the face of anger, frustration, and negative emotions. So I know this may sound ridiculously simple, but the next time you consume something, just notice how you emotionally are feeling and how your face is responding. 9 times out of 10, you're constricting your face because you're naturally in this mode when you're on a computer or on a screen, squinted and focused, that when you're consuming that data, you're actually getting more anxious simply because of how your facial structure is. I know this may sound ridiculous, but I want you to try it before you knock it. The next time you read an article, the next time you're having a conversation with someone, make sure to have a more open body language, okay? You don't have to be like, ah! Like, you know, because then you'll freak them out, okay? But you want to have this more focused reality on, am I squinting my eyes or am I opening them? So this is just a physiological thing you can do to control what you can't control, which is your physiology. How you consume the info will actually impact the way you feel about it. So you ever read an article and then it makes you feel like you're just horrific? Well, the odds are really good that you probably are squinting when you're reading it. Just try opening it up and it'll actually create an easier experience with it, okay? So I want to go into what's working now. Yeah. So what's working now? Once we move from from disappointment to regret, and we focus on what we can do without rumination, okay? When we move from uncertainty, out of uncertainty into risk, when we start controlling, we can control our physiology. You want to say, well, what are the specific actions I can do? What I would argue is that there are things and actions you all can be doing within your business that maybe you haven't thought of, or that maybe you need to do more of that you've done in the past. I'm going to give you some examples. And then I would love if people are open to, in the chat, sharing maybe some things that you're doing within your business to give examples of it as well, of how you're pivoting and how you're controlling what you can't control. There was a wine company that had normal, wine shop sales, right? I don't know the legality of this because I'm not in the alcohol industry and I'm sure there's a lot of legality, but what they figured out how to do was, instead of people having to come into the store, they created a delivery service where they would deliver the wines to their customers. And if they bought a certain wine, their expert wine taster would do a virtual wine tasting on a particular wine. So what they would do is create one wine, and they would send an email out to their entire list that says, we're going to be doing a wine tasting together with this particular wine. If you order this wine, we can deliver it to you. Obviously, liquor stores are still open, but they wanted to just make it easier for people. So they created a way to do a delivery service to deliver the wine to people in their area and then do a virtual taste testing together. The benefit of doing that is that they actually saw an increase in those wine sales because people actually wanted to do virtual wine tastings. Now, they were doing wine tastings in their store before, but taking it virtual opened up more opportunity for them and opened up for them to sell more. So thinking about how to educate people virtually is an incredible way to start thinking about what you can do now. In addition to that, there are a lot of things that you can't control right now, right? Like you may not be able to control businesses, but what you can do is maximize your reach. one of the strategies that a lot of businesses are doing that they can control is they're maximizing their reach for folks. So they may not be driving revenue per se in the way that they normally would, but they're maximizing their reach so that when they can drive revenue, they're in a good place, okay? So examples of that is doing more education. All the statistics are saying that there's an uptick, obviously, in people's time online. So creating a educational component to what you're doing that maybe hasn't been there before online has never been more valuable. So if you are a credit union, you know, and you teach and you have a lot of videos on finance and education, it may make sense to start doing, hey, all of our members, we're going to be doing these financial education pieces virtually, in person. We're going to be teaching you about subjects, teaching you about different things that are available, and we're going to do it via Zoom or through Facebook Live or through Instagram Live. And then you can use education as a way to maximize your reach during this time, right? Which is really, really, really good. I've seen other businesses. Now, obviously not every business can do this, but you look locally at Beacon Skiff, they obviously did a really great transition to creating hand sanitizer. You know, they were making alcohol and then they just changed the kind of alcohol they were making. So looking at what people's needs are. For me, I'm a public speaker, right? I do speaking engagements. As you can imagine, all of my speaking engagements have canceled, right? Now, a few of them have transitioned to virtual trainings, right? Which is great, but most of the physical ones have canceled. For me, it wasn't like a lot of my friends who all they do is speaking. It's kind of tough for them because everything was taken away. But I've also had an online course for 5 years that I've had available that teaches people about speaking, the industry of it. So I just put an emphasis on the sales of my online course, and it was something I always did on the side. It now became part of my kind of main thing, right? And then during this time, I was able to launch something I've been wanting to do for probably a year, which I haven't had the time to, which is creating a course to teach people how to create their own course and how to use speaking engagement to work together. So using this time to create that thing that you've been wanting to for some time that you haven't is a great use of the time you can't control. I know a client that usually does B2B business. They've started taking on B2C customers. Now, obviously a B2C customer is not going to give you the same financial reward as a B2B, but during this time, if you are B2B, but maybe there's a side that you can create to help consumers, you do that. It may be at a different function, it may be at a lesser fee, but at this point, what you want to do is focus on how you can be best of service, how you can bring revenue in. So it may be taking on customers you would normally pass to someone else, or taking on people who normally would say, hey, I wouldn't take this person on, but maybe I will. So what you want to start looking at is how you can impact people through education online. And again, we're kind of sort of doing that right now. You know, I think this is great training. I want you to think about how you can create education for people, and you literally can just go onto Facebook Live, build up that information for people that builds that trust that maybe hasn't been there before. Maybe they know that you're credible, but maybe they don't have trust because they don't know you. And you can start building a way to bring people into the top of your funnel so that they can start becoming clients, customers, members on down the line. And you'll be surprised, a lot of people actually are spending significantly more time buying online. If you can move some of your services to be purchased online, you'll be surprised at how many people might take you up on it, okay? So are there any questions? I know I'm kind of doing the thing where you write on a postcard and you start out with really big letters, and then we get to the bottom of the postcard, you write kind of small because you're finally trying to fit it all in. I realize we got like 3 minutes left, and I just want to make sure we can answer all questions. Are there any questions that anyone has about pivoting online, changing, going from B2B to B2C, doing educational content, bringing people into your world, maybe showing them some behind the scenes footage, documenting what you're going through and sharing it with others, working on a project that you've been wanting to work on but never had time? Well, this is an incredible time to work on that project. I want to make sure we're helping you before I leave you with one final thought. Good. Shannon, any questions coming in that I might not see?
There's nothing coming in right now. I sent a message a few minutes ago to send them into the chat. So if anyone has them, just type them on in.
Okay, cool. Ways to stay mentally productive. Great. Very quick, Najee. The ways to stay mentally productive is you have to challenge yourself to do something brand new right now. Right now, if you've wanted to pick up video editing, it's a really important way to start picking up that skill, because challenging your mind to build a new skill, whether it's lassoing, whether it's crocheting, if it's on a personal side, if it's video production or podcast creation on the professional side, now I would argue is the best time to build up that skill that you didn't have previously, or read those books that you didn't have time to, because that will give you the edge and you can control that. Okay. What are people lacking most right now? Honestly, I think they're lacking an understanding of the distinctions of what we talked about, Kate. What people are lacking most right now is how to make a distinction between uncertainty, between risk, between regret and disappointment. Because when you can make those distinctions, you can have more control over your emotional state. And when you have control over your emotional state, you can have more control of the actions that you take. And ultimately, you can only control what you can do. You can't control what everyone else does. Yeah. All right. You're welcome. I'm going to leave you with this final thought before I pass it back to the great folks, Lisa and Shannon. For everyone here, I want you to imagine that. All right, cool. I want you to imagine that it's, 50 years in the future, or, however old you are. I want you to imagine that you're, 70, 80 years old. And maybe some of you are 70 or 80 right now. So you can imagine it. But I want you to imagine we're at the end of this pandemic, and your kid is sitting on your lap, your grandchild is sitting on your lap, and they're asking you, hey, grandpa, grandma, I heard about what happened way back in 2020. How did you handle it? I want you to think about what you would want to tell that grandchild on how you handled yourself during this time. I'd want you to think about if you could tell them the best possible scenario on how you handled 2020, what would you want to tell this child in the future? And I would argue that what you would tell them is the actions you should be taking right now so that you can get the best experience possible with this time. And when you think that way, you truly will be able to control your controllables. So if you guys want to stay in touch with me, I'm the only Arel Moodie in the world. It's super easy to find me. Social media is great, LinkedIn, Facebook. I accept all requests. I know we're cut on time here, so let's come to this. Whoops. Sorry. There we go. Lisa, Shannon, do you want to jump in and talk about some of the resources that are available? Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. Love you all. This was really, really awesome. Lisa, Shannon, would love to hear about some resources they have, and hopefully folks can control the controllables.
Sure. We thank you again. That was awesome. Every time I hear you speak, it's just always it's real and it's uplifting, and it's always a worthwhile time. So I hope everyone found value from that. And I apologize for any audio we had. Like we said, it is being recorded. So if there was anything you might have missed, check out the Center State CEO YouTube page. It'll be up at some point, probably later today. And you can see the whole thing without any interruptions. So on this page, there's some resources. The COVID-19 resources on the Center State CEO site are ever changing. We're constantly adding, and the toolkit is brand new that we just launched. We had some information out on it last week, and it's up on the site now. So I would definitely recommend any of the links you see on here. Please check them out. Go to Center State CEO, link through to any of these helpful areas. We're busy, we're working, and we're here for anyone that might need some help. Arel has a special guest. I love it. I have one standing right next to me. And any questions, we do have an email specifically for this crazy time that we're all experiencing, support@centerstateceo.com. We're fielding those, sending those to where they make the most sense. So please check out any of these links. Contact Arel, contact Center State CEO. We're available and happy to help wherever we possibly can. So if there aren't any other questions, if there's any more, you got about 2 minutes to type them in real quick. Otherwise, I think we will wrap up and thank Arel once more for being here for us.